It'd be hard to think of someone better to honor on a night with a banquet entitled Equipping Global Leaders than Joel Carpenter. I got to know Joel before he came to Wheaton College as director of the Institute for the Study of American Evangelicals, but that was the circumstances in which I knew he was going to do really good things. Old historians, people in their mid-30s, or like George Marsden, maybe even 40, knew what we wanted, and at Wheaton we knew we had to have somebody to keep the paper clips in order, to be sure there was water for the speakers, and to get those reimbursement expense checks out in a hurry. So Joel was just the person for that kind of task. We hired him, and after 2 or 3 months, it turns out that we had overestimated our abilities and underestimated his capacities. He turned out to be the Mr. Ed of the ISAE. Some of you who are not old enough will have missed that great contribution to world civilization that the CBS television network sponsored by a 6-year run of these noir dramas that featured a talking Palomino, fronted by a haphazard guy by the name of Wilbur. We were the Wilbur. George was the Mr. Ed. But for tonight, it's the acronym that's important. M-R-E-D. At Wheaton College, Joel mediated between the administration, the Billy Graham Center, funding, and a lot of historians in the public. He was someone who recruited many individuals to take part in the Historians Project at Wheaton College. He was also someone who empowered particularly younger historians to take part. And then very significantly for our evening, he was a director who not only directed the events and the personnel and the strategies at the ISE, but he directed the course of study. Some of his books, which you may be able to see out in the foyer, were superb studies of American Christian history. Prize-winning book on fundamentalism, 50 volumes of sources on fundamentalism, a really fine edited book on evangelical higher education in America. But when he was at Wheaton College, he also pulled together a path-breaking conference that led to a book published by Erdmans in 1990, Earth and Vessels, American Evangelicals and Foreign Missions, 1880 to 1980. Joel and I are historians, so we've got to do these chronological bits just so you know where we are. At that meeting, Joel brought luminaries like Andrew Walls, the greatest theologian historian of world Christianity who exists, whom I'd never heard of. And Joel brought him to campus. And this was a taste of what would happen when Joel became the Mr. Ed of the Pew Charitable Trust. Joel mediated now between more people, a more or less secular funding agency, many scholars in the United States, but then very significantly he mediated between those outside of the United States, particularly in Africa, with a path-breaking program to enable and encourage and to bring to fruition African theological expertise. He recruited far and wide to help him with these programs. He empowered individuals, especially now, outside of the United States. And he directed not just the Pew fundraising operation, but a whole segment of the Protestant world to think in terms of world Christianity as not what my pastor does week by week, but what is happening in precincts far, far from the shores of the United States. I think maybe Joel was also the Mr. Ed during his service as provost at Calvin College, but I'm skipping over that part of his career because I don't think it's quite as relevant as his becoming the Mr. Ed of the Nagel Institute for the Study of World Christianity. And there, the skills at mediation that he had developed at the ISAE and the Pew Charitable Trust went into overdrive. He had to deal with more funding agencies. He had to deal with more administrators. He got to deal with Baker Books, Erdman's books, the Baylor University Press. He got to deal with the Christian College Coalition, or whatever it's called, the one almost 200 colleges around the world. He got to mediate with new Christian colleges and seminaries and universities around the world. And in this mediation process, he was also all the time recruiting. He was not looking necessarily for people who were already sold on the reality of world Christianity, but who could be sold. And he's been a great recruiter. He also, in his roles at the Nagel Institute, has empowered people, as with his service on the TBN board, empowering people to make the most of what they as Christian people have found about the Lord in this part of the world, but even more in other parts of the world. And then he has continued to direct not only his institute, but to direct the attention of people far and wide to the reality that, as the Nagel Institute for the Study of World Christianity puts it, Christian thought is moving, has reoriented from the north to the world. Those of us who do not realize that, those who do not take advantage of that reorientation, will be the losers for not seeing how the work of the gospel has proceeded in the last century or more, and how it certainly will proceed in the centuries to come. The last word before we have a presentation here is to say that Joel, who's been the Mr. Ed at several institutions, is married to a Mrs. Ed, who is every bit in her own sphere of life, the mediator, recruiter, empowerer, and director in spheres that overlap Joel's occasionally. They like to travel. They like to just pop off to places like Sierra Leone, or the South Pacific, or Thailand, or India, or Ghana. She's been with Joel in this kind of network making, but she has her own sphere of life that she's developed as a very distinguished teacher, and parent, and house manager, and she even lives with a fan of the Detroit Tigers all these years. And that is certainly an accomplishment. So we have a presentation, Joel, and Jan, why don't you come up too and help carry it away, since it is a presentation of a genre. I forgot to mention that one of the things that Jan does is to paint, and she paints well. She sells her paintings, but she contributes the proceeds to schools in Africa, and that is a fitting thing. So the presentation to the Mr. and Mrs. Ed couple is a landscape by a Zimbabwean artist by the name of Charles Nkomo.
Oh my goodness.
It's a really beautiful piece of work.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Jan's house, if those of you visited, will have to make room because it's a lot of her paintings on the walls now. But this one she'll able to find. One more pertinent item. The artist, Charles Nkomo, was born in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, which is the birthplace of Albert Lutuli, who was in effect the Mr. Ed of the African national. 50 years in the middle decades of the 20th century, a great Christian statesman who took advantage of what others from the West had brought him in establishing an African Christianity with real integrity. So Joel and Jan, congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, what a delight to learn about a new name. So I want to thank TBN for this honor, and there aren't many agencies I'd put up with the embarrassment, but for this one, anything. And thank you, Mark, for what I gather was intended to be kind remarks. And well, you know, they make me want to know that guy you're talking about. So typically when I hear words like that and somebody is trying to praise me, I get up and I say, I ask the speaker, would you please send those to my mother? But I don't have to say that tonight because my dear mother is here. So Mom, so Mom, you hear what he said, right? Right? So I guess I turned out all right after all. What a blessing it's been to be able to do these things. And for me, it's meant just one great surprise after another. I never set out to do this kind of work. I wanted to be a great teacher and scholar like our friend and mentor here, George Marsden. But the Lord had other work for me to do, and repeatedly He put me in touch with amazing saints and geniuses. People like Mark, like George, like Ruth and Jim Padilla, divorced, like just any number of remarkable people devoted to the Lord's work, working in some intriguing and often difficult places. People like the visionary funders of the Nagel Institute, Doug and Lois Nagel. Like the wonderful people I work with every day, Donna Romanowski and Nellie Koistra. So it's been a sheer delight. And so to be able to see those who are on the front lines of God's work in this world and doing the heavy lifting out there as agents of God's love and peace and full flourishing. It's been a privilege to serve in this field, not as a star player as I aspired to be, but as an enabler. And that's why I love TBN. They are kindred spirits. They see the big picture, friends. They know of God's great mission in the world to redeem this world with love and forgiveness and beauty and righteousness. And we see this great growth in the number of professing Christians around the world today. But what comes next? Growth in grace, we hope, we hope for ourselves. Growth in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior, and the one in whom all things hold together. And we're created unto good works, said the Apostle Paul. But what are these good things to do? What does the gospel demand? In our time, and in these various, very different places around the world. The church needs people who will dig deep and to think about such things, and who will teach and make disciples. And that work takes some deep learning, my friends. And there are no more powerful instruments for supporting such intellectual work in the world today than libraries. And that's why TBN is so strategic. That's why we at the Nagel Institute partner with TBN hand in glove on book projects whenever we can. That's why Janice and I support the TBN. And you should too. Thank you.